will be a complete prison upon us, locking us utterly. So that in 600 years the phoenix grows old, the law grows old, the dispensation grows old, the institution grows old, and man must either die with it, or else the institution must break and die for man, releasing man from itself. Thus the death of the phoenix also definitely represents the breaking of these cyclic patterns. And this is usually accomplished by a reformation, by the arising of individuals with new and important viewpoints, breaking through tradition and usually dying themselves at the hands of tradition. They may not actually die physically, but they are certainly opposed by tradition. Pythagoras was a martyr to it. Later, so was Socrates. Confucius regarded himself as a heartbroken failure because he was never able to break the tradition in which his life was patterned. Lao Tzu walked out on the tradition completely, and riding on a green ox went out into the Gobi Desert to die as the lesser of two evils. Buddha for 83 years struggled with the tradition. He was perhaps the most fortunate of them all. Zarathustra Spitama died in Persia with an assassin's spear in his back. Thus the phoenix dies, the bird dies in flames, but is born again, constantly death giving birth to life. But against the tremendous weight of tradition rises the mysterious symbol of martyrdom, which is the greatest tradition-breaking force of all time. The great religions are nearly always associated with martyrdom. They represent a pattern by means of which man is released, breaks through, develops a new conscience mechanism, and starts out on another cycle, which will in turn grow old and hold him in bondage at the end of another 600 years. It seems to take in the world of events that length of time for a common social motion to pass through the 7 ages of its existence, coming in the end, after the 6 days of labor, or the 6 centuries, to a Sabbath of rest. It can no longer go on. Now, if we took history and studied it in this light, it would be quite possible to fill in innumerable details and begin to see the tremendous chemistry of motion meeting obstacle, the tremendous psychological chemistry which results in the emergence of these great energized persons who become the custodians of new ways and become the leaders of the next phoenix cycle. These leaders in turn, or those who come after them, must in due course take their own aging bodies back to the altar of the sun, and there voluntarily die that a new age may be born. Therefore greatness voluntarily dies, in order that it may forever release man from bondage to greatness and push man forward to the emancipation of his own consciousness. Later, other factors appear to take on coloring, and the essential religious elements are not so obvious. But in all the periods prior to the Christian era, and including it, these great changes have been identified almost completely with spiritual leadership. With the coming of the Christian era, we see again the tremendous emphasis upon the escape of the individual from a tradition, an old way that had once been new and beautiful, had gradually been corrupted by the decadence of man until it began to take a stranglehold upon the freedom of human consciousness. Then it was that it was necessary to whip the money changers from the steps of the temple. Then it was that the veil had to be rent and the earth torn, at least in the great symbolical account. For again, the individual had to be freed from the negative phase of history, which is tradition. Now, tradition can be good or bad. Tradition which inspires us is the source of great good. Tradition which captures us and holds us, limits us, is a great danger. And all tradition begins by inspiring and ends by enslaving. So man must continually renew the principles of his life. Each of these great cycles, therefore, is involved in making all things new again, in order that the individual may once more experience the dynamic of free action, free choice, voluntary decision. As soon as he has decided for himself, he begins to decide for others. And the moment he decides for others, his culture begins to die. The moment he denies to another the right he demands for himself, he begins to lock and enslave. This is the story of history. This is the part of history which we cannot forget. This is the part of history which we must explore down through the various cycles with which we are concerned. So next week we are going to psychoanalyze historically probably the greatest era that we know, the beginning of the Christian era, and the effects of it upon the world which was to come after.